Hello, and welcome to ABCD EFG News. My name is Spaghetti Brusco. Rice Ray was recently given the Civilian Medal of Honor for outstanding treatment of his wife. And the Jets have dissolved officially as a football organization. They stated their reason as lack of wins and the absence of basic motor skills in their players. We have here a quote from Geno Smith, the quarterback, who said, "I'm actually colorblind. I could never really tell where I was throwing the ball. And in college, I think I was just a little bit lucky." But more importantly, we have new discoveries on the front of early Christian persecution. We head over to correspondent Dan Smith, BYU, who's ready to ask some questions of the historians that have made this vital discovery. Thank you, Spaghetti. And I'm here with historian of Southwestern Gabon Institute of Stonemasonry, Nathaniel Finch. Finch, it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
So when did the persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire actually start?
Well, Dan Smith, BYU. Although these persecutions began under the rule of Nero in approximately 60 AD, the first killings of Christians were actually in Africa a short while after this.
And could you expand on these persecutions, specifically the ones under Nero in Rome?
Most of the persecutions, and subsequently the killings, occurred between 64 and 68 AD, following the Great Fire of Rome, when fingers were beginning to be pointed at Nero for his role in the horrible fire. He turned to the Christians as a scapegoat. Nero justified his persecution by stating that the Christians were following a new superstitious religion. This began the animosity that Roman citizens felt towards Christians, as would be evidenced in later years.
And how did these killings evolve over the years to come?
Originally done in private, a shameless execution by the guards of the emperor, the persecutions took a public turn at roughly the beginning of the 2nd century AD, as noted by Tertullian's Apologetus. As the populace began to wonder about the government's behind-the-scenes actions, Christians who refused to renounce their faith were often killed in brutal ways in the face of the Roman society.
And so where and how were these killings actually done?
So, as previously stated, they were done in a public spectacle all around the Roman Empire, in gladiatorial arenas. Some think that they were bound strictly to the Roman Colosseum. However, realistically, the killings likely occurred all throughout the Roman Empire in all different types of gladiatorial arenas.
And so I've heard that there are different ways in which they killed these Christians. Could you talk about them?
Well, there were three main methods of killing in the gladiatorial arenas, the first of which were by the people. Crowds watching the games would stone Christians to death, throwing large rocks at them as they were tied up in the gladiatorial arenas. And the Christians obviously were tied up so they could not defend themselves. Secondly, some of the greatest gladiators in the world, trained in the Roman camps, would be summoned to kill and maim, sometimes single Christians, but often it would be several armed gladiators mercilessly killing hordes of Christians, all for the crowd's entertainment. Finally, the most popular and brutal method, killing by wild beasts. Ranging from bears to lions, these Christians were pitted against some of the most bloodthirsty and ferocious animals known to man at the time. Here I have a quote from St. Ignatius of Antioch describing these horrific killings. He states that he would rather entice the wild beasts that they may become my tomb, and leave no trace of my body, that when I fall asleep I be not burdensome to any. Let there come unto me fire and cross and struggles with wild beasts, cutting and tearing asunder, racking of bones, mangling of limbs, crushing of my whole body, cruel tortures of the devil. May I but attain to Jesus Christ.
Wow, that really speaks to the dedication that the Christians had towards their faith. And I remember hearing of something called the Great Persecutions. Can you give us some insight on that, Finchi?
Sure thing, Dan Smith, BYU. The Great Persecution was the peak of anti-Christian policies in ancient Rome. It took place mainly under the Emperor Diocletian. He intensified anti-Christian laws, requiring citizens to sacrifice to the gods, as well as formally banning Christianity and arresting all Christian clergy members.
Wow, that is unbelievable. And now, after a word from our sponsors, we'll give you a first-person insight into Rome, giving you some of the horrifying statistics on these horrific killings. Welcome back to ABCD EFG News. Now we're going to travel to Rome, where correspondent X-Wing at Aliciousness is standing by in front of the historic monument. Thank you, Spaghetti. And as we've previously stated, the number of Christians who were killed and persecuted are astounding. And although not all of these killings were done in the Colosseum or even Rome, many of them were. And I'm standing here in front of the Roman Colosseum, wearing an authentic headpiece that many of the gladiators may have worn during the time. And we find a great range in death count during the Great Persecution. Some argue that Diocletian and Gladius, who were the two Roman emperors at the time, may have killed anywhere from 10,000 Christians, which is still a very large amount, to 100,000 Christians. Now, Diocletian was a Roman emperor for 21 years, 284 to 305. We'll estimate that 40,000 of these killings came from him. That comes to 1,904 killings per year, which comes to more than 5 Christians being killed every day. However, Gladius was only emperor for 6 years, from 305 to 311. That means that under his rule, 5,000 Christians were killed per year, and 13 Christians were killed every day, stretching all throughout the Roman Empire. The important thing to note here is that these killings, done in the gladiatorial arenas, were all done to excite and captivate the audiences who were watching them. There were very little economic advantages. Back to you, Spaghetti. Thank you, X-Wing. And that will conclude our special report on Christian persecution. And until next time, I'm Spaghetti Brusco.